Hey guys, it's Ornlu from the future again. In case you didn't see the last video, definitely go check out part one. It will probably be in the description. But I recorded the video, realized I had been talking for an hour, and then thought, oh, okay, probably should just split this into two parts. Part one, already up now. This is going to be part two, and I will get right back into me from yesterday. Next, we have Cumans, a civ that was, shall we say, broken in the first patch. Like, I think I put them at one or two, up there with Aztecs, but yeah, Cumans were insane. They received a ton of nerfs, and even then, you can still see I put them in fairly high B tier, and that's just because their economy is insane. Two TCs in Feudal Age means that you're almost always, like, by the time you both hit Castle Age, well, obviously they'll hit Castle Age first normally, but you will have like a 10 plus villager advantage or something insane like that. The problem with Cumans is that since Kipchaks got nerfed to the ground, they're like really bad. So with Kipchaks not being very good and you not having Bracer for your Cav Archers, even if they do produce quickly, you really struggle against Halbs. I've seen this and I've played with it and against it, where the Cuman player will be looking to do really, really well, but then there's just a swarm of Halbs from a civ that has some sort of Halb bonus, and then you're like, well, I guess I'm dead. So yeah, that's definitely their big problem. Step Lancers also not being very good right now. It hurts the civ, and it definitely still has some problems, but even then, you have fast cavalry and a really good eco, fully upgraded halberdiers, you have siege rams, so how bad can the civ really be that has all those things going for them? Next in, middle place or close to it, as always, is the good old Byzantines. Nothing changed about them. The meta, doesn't even matter. The civ is always going to be like middle of the pack, unlike most map types. They have very few bad matchups. They have very few matchups that they're amazing in. You usually don't have the greatest aggressive options ever, but you can kind of absorb most anything and get to a, really strong, grindy late game army composition. That doesn't sort of lend itself to a very fast play style, so especially in a world where you can pick civs, you're probably not going to be picking Byzantines all that often. But if you are playing random and, get Arabia and you get Byzantines, you're like, okay, that's fine. Chances are I have a fighting chance. So, cheap trash units, cheap Imperial Age can be really nice, incredibly broad tech tree. I'm sure you guys know what makes Byzantines good and, well-rounded, so that's all true still. Next, we have our third last con civ, and that is Bulgarians. See the dismounted Konik right there for the little picture. And they're still kind of a weird civ. They're one I actually have played a fair amount of on Arabia. I played actually a lot of Bulgarians on Arabia now that I think about it. They're a fun civ. So the early Men-at-Arm potential with your free Men-at-Arm upgrade is really strong. Like, you can hit your opponent fast, and if you have a Tower Rush follow-up behind it, you can then get to Castle Age and maybe drop a forward Krepost and add in some Koniks. So, like, that is a very strong game plan, but you also lack Crossbowmen. And your eco bonus is your TCs cost less stone, which is more useful than I thought it would be, because there are situations where, like, you have to build a defensive watchtower because you aren't making a ton of archers and just trying to make a few skirms or something, and you can put an extra TC down, like, on stone or something without having to use the market at all, so that's really nice. And you are wanting to spend a lot of stone as Bulgarians on Kreposts and castles and stuff. So that's all going to be good. The problem is they're very reliant on the Konik as a unit, which got nerfed very heavily in terms of its attack rate, and you kind of need the stirrups upgrade at the castle for it to be like a super high DPS unit in melee fighting. But like, once you get that going, like, the Konik is just insane. Like, it is like 2 units in 1. And, you throw Halbs against it, the Halbs will kill the horse rider, or the horse, and then the rider jumps off and becomes an infantry and just kills the Halb. So Halbs are like a dubious counter, but the unit is pretty expensive. Your trash is actually pretty good. Your Hussars are actually like one of the best Hussars in the game with the faster attack speed from stirrups. Like, they're actually like really good. So that's really nice to have. Your Halbs are fully upgraded. Your infantry upgrades are free. So like, if you're playing against, say, like Mayans or something, and like they're having a big eagle warrior switch. Like you can just like plop down some barracks and just have two-handed swordsmen right there for you. So that all is very nice, but they're a little bit one-dimensional, and they don't have like the greatest eco upgrades or eco bonuses in the world. And the not having the last armor upgrade for their archers can kind of hurt them versus, like really strong cav archer civs, especially. But they're still definitely a solid civ. Next, we have Ethiopians, who are going to be next to Vikings, and I always kind of think of these two civs as very similar. Ethiopians are like the more military-focused one, and Vikings are the more economic-focused one. But starting out, obviously, with Ethiopians, plus 100, food and gold when you advance to the next age means that, yes, you have a very strong Drush-fast castle into crossbowmen, normally. And this is going to be even more true on maps like Golden Pit, where you are even more likely to see those sorts of strategies. But for good old Arabia, you can still have a very strong amount of arm rush, your archers attacking faster, helps in a big archer shootout, and it makes you able to micro a little bit more quickly. If you can sort of adjust, your stop and shoot sort of thing micro effectively, that is definitely a nice bonus to have. And then in the late game, you have really, really good siege. Showtells are an amazing counter to Eagle Warriors. But you're still missing that mid-game eco bonus, like, a lot. And then in the late game, your army is very slow. Yes, you have hussars, but they're not very good hussars. And then, your archers, your siege, halberdiers, like, that's all very, very slow. So that can be definitely a little bit of a problem in a map that, again, is, like, super open, but they're definitely a strong pick. Like I said, Vikings are going to be very similar to Ethiopians. Sort of, I guess, the archers and infantry sort of thing. Vikings might not have as many strong military options, I would say, as Ethiopians, not having as good of siege, as good of archers, that sort of thing. Even worse cavalry. But they have like one of, if not the best eco bonus in the game, with free wheelbarrow and handcart. So that's good. Vikings, kind of like Franks, are like a very sort of intuitive game plan civ, where you can go for early militia or men-at-arms, go like, archers in feudal age, plus some knights or something in early castle age to deal with some skirms, get a super strong boom, get into imperial age, and then kill them with Arb Siege Ram or mix in berserks and, try and kill them that way. The problem is, once both players get to late game, then Vikings really fall off against most civs, of just lacking those really strong late game options on land, which can be a problem. And I think, honestly, the big difference maker for me, and like why I put them one below Ethiopians, is their cavalry is really bad. Like, no husbandry, even for like your mid game knights, can be like a really big problem, and it hurts a ton as far as like late game rating goes. But still, like, they're definitely a very comfortable civ for a lot of people, and with a good eco, that can usually carry you through. Getting close to the end of our B tier, but we will have Saracens next, a civ that had its brief moment in the spotlight when DE came out, with the super powerful archers that just annihilated buildings and was like kind of a joke. That was nerfed. It is now not as good, but still pretty good. Like, especially in Castle Age or Crossbowmen, they can still tear down buildings pretty quick. And then, beyond that, the market bonus can certainly help you out. You can sell stone and get like a really fast castle age time if you want to go for that. And you have a very broad tech tree as well. Camels, obviously, is what the civ excels at if you are up against a lot of cavalry, but then having the very strong archer and cav archer options is quite nice as well. Good siege, good monks, good infantry. The problem is you don't have cavaliers as an option, which sort of limits you to some extent in terms of how much you ever want to invest into knights in situations where you want that heavy cavalry. And of course, they don't really have like the greatest, most consistent eco bonus ever. Like, the market bonus is helpful in a lot of scenarios, but it's not always helpful, and it isn't like as sort of universally useful as like most of the top civs eco bonus. Like, literally looking at all of S tier, their eco bonuses are like so much more universally applicable in like every single game and every single matchup. So the market bonus is a little bit wonky. And the Mameluke is also really expensive, but still a lot of options, and the archers are still actually pretty good. Finally, rounding out our B tier, we have Indians, who are kind of similar to Saracens, but they have a much better eco bonus in the cheap villagers, and they even have better camels, but you don't get the Nightline at all, which makes them have really bad matchups against the American civs, who where other civs would rely on knights, say in early Castle Age, to deal with Eagle Warriors. Indians don't really get that luxury, so Eagle Warriors can kind of be a big problem, because when you're forced to make Indian infantry, you're like, why am I playing Indians as an infantry civ? Like, that's not really what you want to be doing. But still, you have fully upgraded cav archers. No arbalest is a little bit awkward as well. No siege ram. But you do have halberdier, which is nice. I personally think they're like a little bit less consistent than Saracens, but they're still, totally fine. You have a very strong, intuitive game plan with the Imp Camel. If you can get to that, it's going to do really well versus civs that don't have the greatest infantry or whatever. And yeah, they're still a totally solid civ, so that's why they still do make it into B tier. Okay, now we enter the world of average civs with C tier. Civs that are okay, but you're probably not going to want to pick them all that often, and definitely have their problems when it comes to like being a super viable competitive civ. But, with that said, they're not bad. If you random this civ on Arabia, don't, smash your keyboard or something, because chances are you're totally fine. It's just they aren't as competitive in as many situations as, the higher civs. They definitely feel awkward at times, whereas, say, the B tier civs usually don't feel super awkward. So starting that off will be the Teutons, a civ that just got buffed. Their farmers are now 36 wood as opposed to 40, so they're even cheaper. And then their infantry now get +1 melee armor starting in the Castle Age, which means their halberdiers, when fully upgraded, take an additional hit to be killed by paladins, which is really nice, especially in team games or whatever, but is still definitely nice in a 1v1. Your champions and even longswordsmen are even stronger against Eagle Warriors, so that's all going to be very good. They're still slow. They're still really slow. And that's just the civ. It's how it's designed. They're really good on Arena. Definitely consider playing Teutons on Arena. If this were an Arena tier list, they'd be up in S tier or Black Forest, but that's not Arabia. It's an open map. It favors units that are either fast or ranged, and Teuton units tend to be neither. So you still do have a very good eco. It's even a better eco than it used to be, but no husbandry for your knights can be a little bit of a problem. Not the greatest skirmishers or scouts that don't even get to be light cav, and yeah, it's not the greatest ever. Late Castle Age definitely can be a big problem for the civ, and certain other civs can just kind of dance around them, like say Mongols or whatever. So that can be a bit of a problem for the civ. But if you can sort of get to that late game grindy scenario where you're just throwing your units at their units in one big slow push, Teutons are going to do really well there, as their defenses are super good, their siege is super good, their monks are super good, and then, like I said, their halbs are definitely a force to be reckoned with. I know I've played games where Teuton halbs did surprisingly really well. So yeah, definitely a civ that you should at least maybe try. Give her the old college try in a game or two. See if you think the buffs are enough to make them even remotely viable. I think they're still pretty, they're not B tier good, but they're at least, somewhat viable, which is definitely better than they used to be. So I'm happy with that. Next will be Malay, a civ that can definitely feel like S tier or D tier depending on the situation. They are going to be somewhat happy that the meta, like I said, has been slowing down a little bit, because it means that you're not getting towered and getting, your resources denied or whatever. But they always are going to have the problem where, one, their cavalry sucks, and two, they are really susceptible to being lamed. Kind of like Chinese, but Chinese have way more powerful options, in general. The faster uptime means that you can go up with more villagers, but when you hit feudal age, you don't really have as many resources because the villagers haven't had time to pay for themselves yet. And then, like I was saying, their tech tree can be a little bit awkward. Karambits can be very good, but also is a great way to waste a ton of resources if you're fighting, say, like heavy cavalry or civs with like good infantry bonuses or something. So they're a little bit awkward, but if you can not get lamed and have a really bad map or get tower rushed or something like that, you'll find that you'll have a very powerful economy. You do have fully upgraded arbalests and fully upgraded halberdiers, skirmishers, trash two-handed swordsmen. Yes, they cost 5 more food than they used to, but they're still pretty solid. So they're definitely like not a bad civ. I just wouldn't say they're the most consistent civ. Next up, we have Berbers, a civ that I really like and like believed in so much for so long, but I have to face the truth that they're not the greatest 1v1 Arabia civ. You just don't have enough of an early bonus. Even in a meta that's like slowing down a bit, that doesn't mean that like you don't need a super early like eco bonus or whatever. Like you do. And the faster moving villagers, it's nice, but it's not like a massive increase in terms of like your farming rate, and it's like even more negligible in any other aspect. So it's not like the greatest ever. Genitors have been buffed. Genitors are pretty good now, guys. Like, try them out. They're pretty strong. Camel archers are also one of the best unique units. Cheap knights, cheap hussars, all of that's super good, but it just comes back to that economy bonus or just overwhelming like early presence in general, and Berbers don't really have that. They can be pretty weak to halberdier pushes, like with siege rams or something in, say, like early Imperial Age. It's definitely a big weakness for the civ. Like, yeah, you have hand cannoneers, but without arbalests. That takes a little bit of time to switch to normally. So that can definitely be a little bit of a problem for the civ, but also in a lot of other areas, you can just have such a dominant, fast-moving, cost-efficient army. So definitely, again, like all these C-tier civs, they're not bad civs. They're just awkward in certain scenarios. Next, we have definitely a civ that is glad to see itself out of D tier, Vietnamese, who in the most recent patch now have their economic upgrades. That includes all of your mill, mining camp, lumber camp upgrades, as well as wheelbarrow and handcart, no longer costing any wood. So they're saving, a decent amount of wood in the early to mid-game, I guess even in Imperial Age a little bit as well. So where does that put the civ? Everyone's always said they needed an eco bonus. Now they have one. It's not the strongest eco bonus ever, but it's something. And I think that's kind of where Vietnamese are as a civ. Like, they're fine. They're all right. Rattan archers are good, but they're really expensive. 50 wood, 45 gold. Like, you're paying double the wood compared to like an archer, but they are, faster. You have so much pierce armor, you can raid with them pretty well. But they're still slow. Like, they're still a slow civ. And like, they are by design, right? You have halberdiers, bombard towers, ranged units, elephants. Like, it's definitely among the more slow civs in the game, and that's just not something that lends itself to, the more fast-paced Arabia as much. With that said, they're way better than they used to be, and like, if you random them, you're no longer like, ugh, Vietnamese. Like, you're like, okay, fine, Vietnamese. And that is a noticeable improvement and something that, I'm glad it is part of the game. Another civ that just feels fine is Portuguese. For 1v1 Arabia, they have a grand total of 1 bonus that gold units, all units cost minus 15% gold, which is like, yeah, it's nice and it helps throughout the game, but it's not like any world-ending civ-defining bonus or whatever. You have 1 unique unit with the organ gun, which is cool and is interesting and is powerful, but it's still like, that's it. And you have arquebus possibly in like the late game to give your gunpowder units ballistics. Like, other than that, the civ is just very generic. Like, very generic feeling. So you have arbalests, you have cavaliers, so that's all good. Organ guns are a strong unique unit that in mass can feel like almost impossible to deal with, but they are pretty slow to get up and running. Compared to their Iberian brethren, the Spanish, like, organ guns feel like a slower but more powerful in mass, Castle Age gunpowder unit. Like, the civ is just kind of slow. It doesn't really shine in any given area, which doesn't make it like a bad civ. It's just so many of the other civs have so many more impactful bonuses that can, get you out on the map more aggressively, more quickly. But still, Portuguese are fine. Continuing our journey with fine civs, we have Burmese. Yes, the Arambai got buffed, but it's still a little bit awkward. Your archers are really bad, which is never a great sign for a civ. But, your Arambai, although expensive, they're not quite as good as conquistadors. Yes, they're better in Imperial Age, but Spanish already are fine in Imperial Age without necessarily having conquistadors. Your elephants are good, your monks are good, your infantry is good, your siege is okay. But if you're in a situation where you really want a lot of good archers, Burmese are I guess a Rambai kind of. So it's always going to be a little bit awkward for the civ and is definitely inhibitive, but they're still probably better than people give them credit. I think they're one of the least or least popular civ or something, and they definitely deserve to be better than that. They're not bad. They have their weaknesses and they don't really stand out as much as other civs. Next we have Italians, a civ that is amazing on water maps and hybrid maps, and really, really generic on land maps. You have the cheaper age up, and you have the, good Genoese crossbowmen and arbalests, but that's it. You don't really have any persistent eco bonus. Condos usually aren't very good at all on Arabia. Yeah, it's just you're again a little bit of a slow civ. You have bombard towers potentially, but you miss halberdier and you miss siege ram. That's always kind of a problem. Fully upgraded hussars is definitely nice for the civ. And again, it's not a bad civ, but it's what, fifth from the bottom? That's, I think, good for balance, because Italians aren't that bad. They're just generic. And that's honestly fine in a lot of cases. Unless you're facing one of the S tier civs. If you're facing even a B tier civ and good Italians, you're probably fine. If you do lose, it's more likely that it was you playing worse than your opponent or having a worse map or something than it being a civ loss. So take responsibility for your losses. So next we have Koreans, a civ that used to be super OP, and then it used to be terrible, and then it was OP, and then it was terrible. It's gone back and forth a lot, which I guess is somewhat resonant historically, but I don't need to bring in my academic studies here. So the cheaper wood cost, it's not an amazing bonus for your archers, skirmishers, and halberdiers, which is the majority of what you're going to be getting out of the bonus, because they just don't cost that much wood to begin with. Compare it to the Portuguese bonus, units tend to cost more gold than they do wood, at least as far as land units go. On water, it's definitely a much more helpful bonus. And Koreans are a totally solid water civ. Yeah, on Arabia, it's not. That's your eco bonus, quote unquote, and that's not really that much of an eco bonus. Again, you're a very slow civ, but war wagons are 94 wood or something, 60 gold. That's pretty cheap for a unit that's really good. War wagons are one of the most pop efficient units in the game. So if you can just get a fast castle into war wagons and slowly creep out onto the map, it's a very slow play style and isn't going to work in all situations, but it can be very powerful. So despite being fourth from the bottom, it's not Koreans are the worst civ ever by any means. They're fine in a lot of situations. Rounding out our C tier is one of the most generic civs of them all, the Tatars. They're a civ that I thought would be really good at launch. Partially that was because Steppe Lancers were super strong and they were one of the two civs to get Steppe Lancers. But even so, they kind of just don't feel as good as the other civs. If you're going for the whole cav archer civ with good light cav, there are other civs that can do that better. Huns, or Magyars, or Cumans, Mongols, obviously. There are other civs that can kind of do the same thing, but better in most situations. And that's just kind of the big problem with the civ. Your infantry is really bad. They now have halberdiers, but they still miss even the Castle Age armor upgrades, meaning that they're paper mache against most ranged units. So that's kind of a problem. And then, their cav archers are fine, but not as amazing as you would like. Their Keshiks are actually really good, but it's not like a unit that you can just go for right off the bat. So again, it's just a pretty generic civ that probably would want a little bit of a redesign, maybe, just to make them feel a bit more unique. The elevation bonus, Arabia is a hilly map, but it's not like you can leverage it at every fight, at every opportunity, or something like that. However, the longer lasting sheep is nice. It helps get you a nice early, Dark Age into mid-feudal age even. You don't have to start seeding farms as quickly. And then, you do have good light cav and cav archers and your Keshiks. You even have like bombard towers and siege rams randomly. Siege rams not so much, but bombard towers is like kind of strange out of nowhere. But hey, it's something. It's there for you. So it's definitely it's not bad. It's just other civs are ones that excel and feel super powerful, at least in some scenarios, whereas Tartars don't really get to feel that as often. So now we get to our final tier, the D tier, and usually this is where I'm like, sorry guys, but these civs just aren't that great. And that's kind of true still, but look how short it is. It's 2 civs, just Goths and Turks. And that, again, that just means that I would consider at least 33 civs in the game to be, at least somewhat okay. Yeah, Goths and Turks are not good. You can still win games with them. They still have their own advantages that you can exploit. They will even have certain matchups that are good against even some high-tier civs. So don't, completely despair if you get one of these civs. They're just, on average, given the matchup, given the map, whatever, they're just not as good as the other civs. So starting off with Goths, they did recently get a buff where they now have their infantry discount extended to the Dark Age. So you now have a really good drush that you can make militia. You can make more militia, and you can make them more quickly with their faster working barracks. The problem is that's really predictable, and if you're walled by that point, then it's not as good. Yeah, you get the extra attack versus buildings, but the civ is still really one-dimensional. You don't have an eco bonus. No, cheaper militia do not count as an eco bonus. And you don't have defenses, and you're just kind of pigeonholed into going for mass infantry. Yeah, the Huskarl is really good. Sheep halbs are really good, and some civs just can't deal with that well. Most famously, Mayans have a very hard time against Goths once the Goths get rolling. But it's just really hard to get up and rolling on Arabia because it's such an open map, and you're likely to get raided all the time, everywhere. Especially because, players will not want to let Goths get going. So yeah, just try not to do that if you're up against Goths, and you'll probably be fine. But with that said, if you're not completely prepared for the early militia coming at you or early men-at-arms, yeah, that can definitely tear you apart. Same with Goth spam and Imperial Age if you can get to it. So that is why I do put them above Turks, which of course has so many tier lists for Arabia Go. Rounding things out with Turks, it all goes back to the fact that they don't have elite skirmisher, in my opinion. Yes, you also don't have pikemen, which is a huge problem. You don't have onager, which can be a huge problem. But I think of those 3, the biggest problem is missing elite skirmisher and that is just so painful in feudal age and early castle age, even more so than in post imperial age, because in late feudal age, in a huge amount of 1v1 games, you're making a lot of skirmishers, because the skirmishers will kill archers, and you don't usually want to be making a ton of scouts at that point because you want to be saving food for castle age. Same goes where you don't want to be making a ton of infantry at that point because you want to save food for castle age. Skirmishers, yeah, they cost food, but they're a lot cheaper on the food cost. So usually what a lot of civs will do in a ton of situations is just rely on those skirmishers to get you through the feudal age. And then with Turks, it's I don't really want to make any of those. So, yeah. You can make skirmishers, but then you just can't upgrade them to elite skirmishers, which means they're just going to be so bad in Castle Age. And then, of course, that means you can feel like you're behind in early Castle Age, and then, yeah, you have a good unique unit, and they do have a lot of good options as far as gold units. Their cav archers are really good. Having the free hussar is nice, but then again, you're missing even pikemen and then elite skirmisher in the late game. So like if you get your gold denied by like a forward tower rush or something, or a castle drop or whatever, Turks are just like, Also, they're very stone reliant. You want the stone for your castles and janissaries. You want the stone for bombard towers potentially. Like bombard towers are actually a lot more viable if, say, you're going for cav archers because you don't need the castles for janissaries as much, or even trebuchets with their bombard cannons. It's so like common on Arabia to have some of your resources denied for whatever reason, like golden stone, and Turks just really struggle in those situations. But with that said, they also have situations where they excel, same as Goths. So I don't want you guys to think that it's completely hopeless if you get one of these low-tier civs. You can make it work. You just have to be a little more creative. All right, guys, so that's going to be my 1v1 Arabia tier list for, late February 2020? Definitely a lot of changes, a lot of movement, both up and down, obviously, for some civs, but I think, again, I want to stress that, one, I think that the game is becoming more balanced, which is good, and you can use more civs in more situations, which means more interesting games, at least from my perspective, which is great. Two, that the metas can change over time. These civs can, move up or down depending on whatever matchup or situation you're in. It's not like all A tier civs unilaterally have better matchups against all B tier and below civs. Like there is, movement up and down there. And like I said, you can probably move most civs around one or two spots, and it, to me, it doesn't really make a difference. So yeah, it's just to give you an idea of not only what civs are strong, but why they're strong or why they're not strong on Arabia specifically. So yeah, definitely let me know what your thoughts are on my list in the comments. What you would rank certain civs and why, and definitely do consider leaving a like or subscribing if you enjoyed. Definitely does make me feel good. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.